Hey everybody, welcome back to another Timer Tip Tuesday. Today we're going to be going over some advanced segment setup and race day scoring. So if you joined us last week, we went over some of the basics of segment setup and configuration. That's now out and available on our YouTube channel if you want to go back and watch it. Today we're going to be digging a little bit deeper into segments along with some other affiliated features to make your events even cooler. So it's noon, so we'll go ahead and get started, or Eastern time. So today we're going to be going over some advanced segments settings. Specifically, we're going to be going over how to set up lap segments, how to use estimated finish times with segments, how to use a data check report for missed segments, remaining segments, setting up segments and tracking for a RaceDay integration if you're using that, and some special reporting features related to segments that we wanted to go over. Then at the end, we'll do some Q&A like we always do. Again, do feel free to submit any questions that you have throughout the session on the questions panel in GoToWebinar. And as always, we're recording this and posting on our YouTube after the fact if you wanted to come back for a review. But yeah, let's jump right in. Okay, so we finished last week's session just briefly touching on lap segments. Today we're going to go a little bit deeper into lap segments. If you are doing anything with lap scoring, it's critical that you understand how segments work with laps. So the way it works is lap events can have segments where two or more segments are added together to create a lap. And actually, every lap has to have at least one segment. Most of the time, it is the case that each lap is a single segment, but you can have multiple. So the locations are used in lap segments similar to traditional segments. And then those segments can be added together to get the full distance of a lap. So you have to make sure, number one, when you're doing a lap race, that your locations are set up and configured to be a lap location. Otherwise, you won't be able to be used in your scored event segment setup. So once you have created some segments, it doesn't do too much in laps. You have to actually create a lap in order to stitch together multiple segments to create a lap. So let's, on this next step here, I'm just going to show you really quick how you would set up your timing location. So just make sure if you're setting up a timing location that you're going to use in a lap event, that you mark it as a lap event timing location. And when you're doing that, you'll notice that the max number of occurrences is grayed out. That's normal. It's because lap locations are going to have a limitless number of occurrences, because basically for a lap race, you don't know exactly how many laps everyone's going to do. It's a 24-hour run, and they can do as many laps as they can do. So you do not have to define any number of occurrences here. The system will allow an infinite number of them effectively. One thing that is important, though, is you do have to set a gap factor. So this is your minimum time for reads between reads in this location. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the actual segments themselves. So when you set up a lap race, you would set up additional segments if you are not using the default lap setup. So when you create a lap scored event, there's this setting on the scored events to say you're going to use the default lap configuration or you're going to not use the default. If you say you're not going to use the default, you would be creating additional segments. The default lap configuration is, hey, you got one segment. You're going around a lap over and over again. If you were doing the non-default advanced lap configuration style, you'd be adding these segments individually. And here's a really great example. So let's say that there's a long lap and a short lap. You could have a segment for each of those. In this case, it's like, it's just not a time start, and it finishes at the timing location you have called long loop. So when you actually get to the point of adding a lap, so you've created your segments and then you want to stitch together two segments to create a lap, you would click that button to say, I want to set up laps. And then in here, you would be able to say, I've got two different lap options, let's say. One is called a long lap and one is called a short lap. The long lap is if someone does the long lap segment, and then right after that, does another long lap segment in this case. So the one it's going out to the checkpoint location, and the other one is coming back from the checkpoint location. And in another slide or two, I'll give you a visualization of this. But basically, it's like if you start at the start finish, you go out to the checkpoint, and then you come back around. That's the full long lap. The short lap is if you just go around, you don't hit the midpoint. So here's an example. So in the top right, I'm showing you, this is like the setting on the scored event setup where you're saying to the system, no, I'm not going to use the standard default lap configuration. It's not just a single course that they go over and over again. I'm actually going to do a checkpoint location inside of one of the laps that I want to set up here. So in this case, I created two segments, one that is going out to the checkpoint and one that is coming back from the checkpoint. The one going out to the checkpoint is 4.5 miles. The one coming back is like a 0.5 miles. And the whole lap itself is 5 miles. And those green dots are my locations, and the arrows are my segments, and the whole thing is the lap itself. So again, just to review, that lap was defined. It's called a long lap, and it's created from whenever anyone does a long lap segment, and then, a long lap to timing point segment, and then a long lap from timing point segment. And they have to do them in that order. So that's really important to understand. So basically, you're constructing this lap definition from any number of segments in a certain order. So at the bottom there, you see two buttons, remove last segment and add segment. If you click those, click add segment, it adds on another drop down to the right of the last one in the row there. So right after the long lap from timing point segment will be added another segment drop down, and then you could select which one you want there, or you could remove segments to take them off the list there. So keep in mind when you look at the lap details area in RaceDay scoring, if you click on a participant and you see the lap details button, it's in results. It's also on the individual record. You'll see the actual names of the segments that they completed in order to do this lap. So here is a great example of a very typical situation for a long lap race where most of the time they're doing long laps, but at the tail end, because they want to try and squeeze in as much distance as possible in the last few hours of the event, they switch over to doing short laps. So here you can see those long laps, they did the long lap to timing point segment, and then the short segment, then the from segment, and they did it again and again, and then they did just the short ones. So it's good to just name these properly so that you understand what's going on when you're looking at them. So here, there are lots of different column options that you can add, you can change, and you can move around when you're timing lap races. So you want to consider all of your options that are available to you. I really like these last segment options to show participant progress as they're actually competing in the event. It allows people to know where a teammate or a friend or a family member is out on course, or when they'll be returning to the main spectator area. So we see a lot of people who will actually create separate reports that are like sorted based on the last lap completed time of day, and then it will just show like the most recent person to hit any of the timing locations out there, and it will basically just show them at the top. So it'll give kind of like a leaderboard for laps. There's some pretty interesting things you can do with these different fields and the ability to change the sort on your reports. So there's some really cool things with laps that you can do with these. So by setting up a timing point and a part of a course only used by a certain length lap, we can parse out which lap is completed by a participant. So basically, in this example, both laps finish on the finish location, but if a long lap to the timing point segment is completed between the finish reads, it knows that it's a long lap and not a short lap. So this is like how the system knows which distance they get added to their record. It's based on, hey, if they just did the short, I know it's going to be 1. If they did this sequence of segments, I know it's going to be 5. All right, so let's talk now about estimated finish times. So this is a pretty recent feature, and it's available in reporting columns and in data checks, I believe. But basically, it's the ability for us to give you a projected estimated finish time, and also net time for clock and chip times. So we could give you the time of day that we think they're going to finish, and we give you their net time, so 18 minutes in the 5K. So these require at least one segment to be present. Basically, what it's doing is it is looking at the last segment completed pace and extrapolating out what we think their finish time is going to be based on the pace of the last segment that they completed. So we don't just do like the average of the total. It's based on the average of the last segment, because if someone is doing a marathon and they're at mile 20, the last segment they completed pace is probably going to be a little bit slower than the total average, so we use that to project not their total time. So again, these are really great fields that can be used in a leaderboard functionality, especially obviously if you have multiple splits going on. It's a cool way that you can display that estimated finish time in your results data for any races that are expected to have people monitoring the course. So longer events, especially ultra marathons, are really great if you have course points where you're collecting data, reads, whether that be chip times or like mobile timing app, just manually entering times in. You can utilize these estimated finish times to really elevate the experience of your participants and spectators. So just a reminder here, if you're using the splits field in RaceDay scoring, a really cool feature is that you can edit the column itself, and you can tell it what kind of times you want to be displayed in here. So this splits field is really nice. It's dynamic. You don't have to think about it. It just puts in all the data for you. So it's really nice because you don't have to add each column individually, but sometimes it's not so nice because it adds all the columns automatically. So you really want to think about the kinds of events that you're timing and whether or not you want segment times or cumulative times to show. And then you probably want to hide the other ones. So for example, the example I always give is for a triathlon, you never want to show cumulative times. And for a road race, you typically only want to show cumulative times. So, a marathon, you want to show a 5K time, a half marathon time, and a full marathon time, for example. You don't want to show a 5K time and then however long of a distance it is between 5K and 13.1 mile time, and then however long distance the last half marathon. You want to show like their actual times from the very beginning of the course to that endpoint for road races. But for triathlons, the other way around. You want to show, hey, you did 30 seconds in the transition, or you did an hour and a half on the bike, whatever. Okay, so when you're setting this up, yeah, so it basically, let me see here. I'm sorry. It's really nice to show all this to spectators, and helps you sell splits the timer. So basically, what I was saying before, so make sure that if you are going to be expecting a lot of spectators for your events, that you are adding this data because it's really valuable. You can help you sell yourself as a timer offering these services. All right, go ahead.
Cool. So we're going to talk a little bit about missed segments, which is another relatively recent addition. So missed segments, it is one of the default data check reports. At the time of this webinar, we have 5 of those out right now. And this lets the user know what segments are missed. I think this also kind of reinforces the concept of internal reporting versus just the reports that go up to RunSignup. So a segment is known to be missed if a later segment is completed based on cumulative distance. Just remembering that when we set up segments, we set up a segment distance and the cumulative distance that would be their total distance covered by the end of that segment. That is how we know the order of the segments. That's also how we know if an earlier segment was missed. It's really useful because it means that you don't have to wait for someone to finish to know that they cut the course or switched events if you have multiple segments out there. For example, if you had a 5K segment that was unique to the marathon, and then a shared split between the marathon and half marathon, missing that first segment would probably be a good indicator that someone switched distances. Um, so it's also important to remember that, like this is based on what is actually being completed out there, and you might get this false positive that, oh, all these people are missing the 5 mile segment, if the data is not coming in reliably, whether that's a bad connection, bad equipment, or maybe it's one of those scenarios where people are spilling over both sides of the road because it's not controlled. You may need to go edit the default data check report so that you're not considering that segment as part of it. Otherwise, it's going to be really hard to wade through all of the people who missed that segment to find the people who are actually missing the other ones that are being reliable. And to do this, you'd go into your data checks and expand the parameters here. You can see that by default, you have missed segments is not null, would bring in everyone. But we can also filter out anyone who missed the 5 mile segment because that's not coming in reliably by just adding a filter and saying missed segments, which is an available field now, and then is not the 5 mile. Keeping in mind that that value there is something that you have to input yourself. So you do need to make sure that that matches the name of your segment exactly. Another useful thing to do with the default data check report is to duplicate it and edit it to look for a specific segment. Maybe people are missing segments here and there because they're wearing their bib in very creative ways, or maybe that you do have some of that spotty data here and there, but you really want to drill down and say, hey, who missed this turnaround? I want to see just those people. So you can duplicate that default data check and then say missed segments contains the name of that one. There are a lot of other ways to utilize segments and missed segments. Another possibility would be to look for anyone in the marathon who finished but completed 4 or less segments. So with the missed segments, we also have number of segments completed, number of segments expected, and number of segments remaining. So in this case, I'm altering that data check to be if they're in the marathon and their number of segments completed is less than or equal to 4 and did not finish is no, meaning they have finished there. I want to see everyone who's maybe I need to drill down and further and see what their times are between those segments. Missed segments is really easy to just drill down, find things, do some good reporting with there. Remaining segments is also one of those new features with the number of segments completed and number of segments expected. Number of segments remaining is a calculation of how many segments a participant still has to complete. And again, this is based on the scored event level and the cumulative distance at the end of their last read. So if you set up 5 segments for the marathon, we are expecting 5 segments. And then some pretty basic math there of number completed and number remaining happen there. But this number of segments remaining unlocks a lot of reporting that you can do. As far as if you had an event that lapped on the same finish line but wasn't a true lap event, maybe it's a 20K doing 4 or 5K laps. It'd be really useful to see how many people were still out with those remaining and to do count checks on those. You can also go into using computed fields with this and doing some math there. So these are some really nice new tools for expanding what you can do with reporting internally. And then this kind of brings us to the most external facing kind of reporting and setting stuff up, and that's segments and tracking. So we have text notifications, email notifications, and RaceJoy. And right now we're going to focus a little bit on RaceJoy timing alerts and setting those up with segments. So RaceJoy, I'm pretty sure you've all heard, but just reiterating, we have the concept now of bib tracking. So it's you no longer can only use RaceJoy if the participant that you're looking to track is carrying their phone with you. You can do RaceJoy tracking with the chip and bib integration, meaning that the reads being used in the timing software are sent to RaceJoy and used to update that participant there and send notifications to family, friends, and even the participant themselves if they're carrying their phone and they just don't want to use GPS. So there's some steps that you need to take to do this. And the first is you need to be a certified RaceJoy timer. We do require you to be certified on RaceJoy to offer that to your races. So first and foremost, make sure you are certified. If you're not, please reach out to info and ask to get your certification materials. But the next thing you need to do is you need to set up RaceJoy timing alerts. So you need to enable RaceJoy for your event and add timing points to the course on the map. You need to set up mapping of the RaceJoy course to timing points in RaceDay scoring and their occurrences, and then you need to start streaming. So if you haven't seen it before, on the navigation bar on the left, all the way at the bottom, there's a new area called notifications. Note that this is not notifications in the top bar, this is on the sidebar navigation. Eventually, timers will be able to configure text alerts from this area as well. So just a note on alternate course processing. If you have like multiple different events that are using the same course, like you can see in this case, we have a 5K, a 5K untimed, 5K extended registration. These are all registration events. They're all mapped to the same 5K course there. So just a simplifying thing. It also is a lot less of a lift for you when you set stuff up later. It's also good to remember that there's relay course processing, which requires a different course. So even if you have a half marathon and it's the same course for the two-person relay, they need to have their own course set up because it is a different kind of processing. Just another note that we do support team tracking and team alerts based on the chip timing data, which is what we're talking about here. And again, if you have that two-person relay course, there's probably going to be a timing mat at the exchange, which makes it a great opportunity to be using RaceJoy and the integration with RaceDay scoring for the chip timing. So the timing points on the course, if a timing equipment is near an official mile signage, configure the timing point at that mile location because you don't need the GPS notification as well, but you need to set points that have timing hardware as timing only locations. You can see on this image, the start is timing only, mile 2 is timing only, mile 5, 10, 11, and the finish. And the reason you need to set those points that have the hardware as timing only is that you want the notifications for progress to come just from the timing hardware. We need to know that that's going to be what we send to RaceDay scoring for the integration. And we also need to know that for the people who are using phone tracking, that notification is going to come from the timing hardware and not from their phone's GPS. It's also worth noting that if you have a gun start, you can definitely still do the timing integration. You just not check timing only for the start location. So when you add those timing points, on the map there, it's good to add a mile marker or a little image of the timing point. If it's not standard, you do need to make sure that that distance is correct there, and make sure that you really only have one marker for a location. If you had like a 15-mile marker and you're putting timing equipment down there, again, just make sure that you're not adding a redundant point there and having a 15-mile marker and a 15-mile timing split. So once you've added all the split points and their distances to the tracking map, you can go ahead and make sure that that timing only part is set up. And also just note in the example here, equipment at a given point provides 2 split points. It would need to be in there twice there. Okay. Once you have the timing point only there, make sure that you have the spoken name updated for these things so that it makes sense. If you don't want it to say, you know, timing hardware box A, that's not going to mean anything to everyone who's running the race. You want it to be a meaningful name like the 10K split. And then once you have everything set up in RaceJoy on the RunSignup side of things, you'll go into RaceDay scoring and set it up. It is very straightforward to set this up, but you need to have those segments built out first, which means your locations need to be built and your segments need to be built. So to set up the mapping of RaceJoy course timing points in RaceDay scoring, you'd go down to that area in the bottom. You need to certify that this event should process timing locations through RaceJoy, and then you would map the location segment and occurrence to the timing points. You can see on the left is the location and the occurrence used there. So if you have multiple occurrences, make sure that you're mapping the right occurrence to the right course point. And then the right is the course point in RaceJoy. And those names, again, one is coming from RaceDay scoring, the other one is coming from your RaceJoy setup. The same RaceDay scoring timing location can be used for different points, like we were saying there. If you had a 5K and 10K split point where the participants cross the same timing map multiple times, again, look at those occurrences and make sure the correct occurrence is being mapped to the correct course point. Don't map extra points like announcer locations. That's not public-facing data. It's not useful, and that ultimately could lead to a less enjoyable experience for people tracking at home. So streaming control, this is, you know, RaceDay. We're ready to go. We've built it in RaceJoy at least 10 days ahead of time. We've enabled this and, you know, confirmed that we are offering this. And a note to make sure that you're doing that early enough that you're letting people find participants do track with bib tracking. Otherwise, they're not going to be able to sign up to follow along with that unless you say, hey, yes, I am doing this. I have set this up. I have done the work. But RaceDay, scored events actual start is required in order to process passings and send them to RaceJoy. If you turn on the RaceJoy connector and you haven't set actual start times, you'll be in a yellow state. So if you're wondering why you're in a yellow state, it is because you haven't set an actual start time. You can use gunshots, markers with equipment to achieve real-time accurate experiences. Just be careful if you are someone who tests the gunshot before the race, that you don't turn on the RaceJoy connector for that race until you are good to go with those start tests. For those of you who are in Florida at the Timer Summit, I did that. And then confirm that you have an accurate start time before you start those streams. Just remember that you know, people want to have a start notification. They want to know when people are out on the course, but it's less important for them to know that in real time, because we're not going to necessarily have pace calculations for those types of, for those people who are not carrying their phone for that. But you do want those to go out. And then just a reminder, if you are in a situation where you have bad data or spotty reception from a split coming in, if they complete a later segment, it's still good to send that data, but it won't send a notification if a later segment and RaceJoy point has been completed. So when you start the RaceJoy interface, we will start streaming when actual start times are set. And a recent update, if you haven't looked at this, is if you go to the RaceJoy connector now, we actually give you a scored event level interface of what's going on there. And you can see that we actually tell you how many reads are sent now. And we tell you if that one's active. So you can get a lot more granular than you could even a couple of weeks ago as far as how you're sending data to RaceJoy. So again, segments drive RaceJoy experience there, and that's going to become more and more popular and prevalent. And it's again, if you're not offering it, it's a great way to do a value add. It's a great way for you as a timer to be selling split points and to elevate that experience. So that's internal facing a little bit before. That's super external facing right there. And now let's talk a little bit about getting creative with your reporting. We give you some really good reporting right out of the box with the overall one, and most of the time that's kind of all you need to send results up to RunSignup. But as Avery was saying, you probably want to customize that, even if it's just deciding whether or not you're going to send cumulative or segment only times up. Going in it and customizing that. Once you have segments, you can really do a lot more with reporting, whether that's the estimated finish times that we were talking about, whether that's the internal pieces. But another one that's really underutilized is pushing stuff other than just overall results up. Um, Leaderboards are a great one. But using the override sort to show something like the fastest second half of a marathon can be really cool. A pretty popular way to use something like this would be like a KOM QOM segment where you just want to show the time for someone's KOM QOM versus their entire race. If you have a race within a race, it's becoming kind of popular for marathons and half marathons to maybe have some kind of sprint challenge, whether that's a sprint to the finish, a sprint internally, or kind of that first mile of glory scenario. Instead of just doing an overall report, build something like that. So you can see there's an override sort here that's using the second half chip time. Now keep in mind that if you're overriding sorts, if you're wondering, well, where's my, just normal second half chip time? Override sorts are done in milliseconds. That's kind of all under the hood. The stuff you want to show reporting wise is not going to have milliseconds on that. That's not something that most people would be able to do anything with. But you can see in the columns listed here, I don't have chip time or clock time listed. We're only caring about this second half itself. And that's a really cool, that's like the basic way that you could extrapolate out of building reports that go outside of just the normal overall. Also, just keep in mind that using the override sort can allow you to create reports that have all sorts of different fields in there. But if you have age, place, and gender place, you can use that because it's overriding the sort there, and you'd see the age, place, and gender place for those segments versus their entire race's performance. So that's kind of a cool way to, that would be the KOM QOM example. Maybe someone's a much better climber than they are at the overall thing, and so they want to see their performance on just that alone. If you want to highlight a difficult segment, if you want to actually segment out your relays into just these pieces, that's kind of a fun way for individuals to see themselves in a larger context as well. So a note here, because we haven't said it yet today, which is kind of surprising, but the most important thing to do when you're creating these reports is to test them. So keep in mind that reports published to RunSignup have, external end users, meaning not the organizer or the timer, and they should be concise and clear and easy to follow without much instruction. So if you are testing reports and you're not sure or don't know this method, you can always go into your report, open up the filters and sort section, and select participants who have not started, not finished, and don't have a bib. It won't have data in there unless you have some test data, but you'll be able to see what that report looks like and kind of tailor that experience more to what your audience would enjoy and understand. If you even want to test pushing that up online, certainly do so. Just make sure that, if you are sending SMS and text and email notifications, that you pause that so that you're not sending anything out. And then using report templates. So if you are doing some of these cool reporting pieces, it's fun, it's exciting, and it can be cumbersome if you're having to do this over and over again. And maybe you're thinking I want to do this at all my races, but I don't want to have to rebuild all of this. It's a lot of time and timers are busy, especially kind of this time of year. Using report templates is a really good way of doing this for repeated workflows, or if you had reporting that you're doing for external stakeholders, photographers, or something like that. The leaderboards would be probably my best example I can think of for this, like Avery was bringing up. A template could be created for the leaderboard report with cumulative time hidden and estimated finish time fields added. These templates can be exported if they're going to be used within your organization and not just on your computer. So these templates live on your computer, but you can export them and import them into other computers within your organization. Or if you're very friendly with other timers and want to give them a hand and you have a cool report, it's a great way to share these things. So you can see this view here is what you would see when you build a new template. You have the option to export, import, select a template and edit it, or add a new one. You can add a name there. You notice that it says half marathon there. You can create templates without scored events being selected, but you will be limited in which fields you can use. As soon as you select a scored event, it unlocks all of the fields that you can use. And it doesn't necessarily need to be a half marathon every time. It doesn't have to have the same setup to do this every time. You just need that to open those fields. And then if they do not match with a race that you're applying this to later, you'll be prompted to map them. Templates must be built before they can be used. So if you have a report that you've built out that you're really fond of, unfortunately, you can't just export that as a template. You have to start by building the template itself. If you're playing around with this stuff, start there. So you go to reports and report templates to create a new template, export, import, or edit them, as we said. And then once you've created those, when you go to build a report, you would select the template under columns to include. Do keep in mind that the templates only apply to columns, their naming and their behavior, but not filtering. So if you created the KOM report, it's not going to do an override sort out of the box. This is just the column names, order, and behavior there.
All right, so I think that wraps it up for our content today. Were there any questions for any of these more advanced segment features that anyone had in the line? Didn't seem to receive any during the session. So if you have any questions, feel free to put them in now.
Thanks,
Kent
Kent.
says, I love Soren's character in cartoon. I do too. It's pretty good.
Shout out to past stuff about AI, but if you build a chat GPT, you can get a styling kind of put together and put in real photos and say, hey, make this in that style. It is worth noting that in the actual photo, I'm only hanging by one hand.
All right, looks like don't have any questions today. So we're all experts in segments. It's great to hear. I guess we'll talk to you next time at the next Timer Tip Tuesday. Thanks for coming, and we'll see you then.